Welcome to True Crime on UnKind TV. I'm your host, Martha, and I am joined by my brilliant co-host, Marisa.
Hello.
Today, we'll be discussing the death of Laci Peterson, her unborn son, Connor, and the conviction of her husband, Scott Peterson. So I remember this case very vividly because it was happening at the same time we were going into Iraq. And it was all over the news. It left quite an impression on me. I was little, I think I was about 10 years old. And I remember Laci's beautiful, beaming smile everywhere. In the grocery store, on TV, every tabloid, every newspaper. It was Christmas, and this had the entire nation gripped. And I think it was the perfect distraction from the idea that we were going to war.
So really, these were the two main stories that everybody heard about. And everywhere you went, every channel you had on, they were always talking about Laci, especially when she was just turned up missing. And they always had that picture of her sitting there in like that red outfit. I think it was like right around Christmas with her big belly and just this beautiful, beautiful woman who everybody was looking for, pretty much all of California. And you couldn't go anywhere without hearing the name Laci Peterson.
Let's talk a little bit about who Laci was. She was born May 4th, May the 4th be with you, I'm a nerd, 1975. She's described primarily, every time I hear someone talk about her, they say she was really funny. She loved to laugh, and she really loved to make other people laugh. She was popular. She was a cheerleader in middle school and high school, and we all know the cheerleader types. Energetic, full of life, and she was tenacious. She was not afraid to go after what she wanted. And when she was in college, she would visit her friend at a restaurant in the area, and that's where she met Scott. And Laci, being bold, actually made the first move and gave him her number. I heard that he didn't believe she had done it. He couldn't believe someone so pretty would want him and would do something like that, and she had to push it again. Yeah, or her friend, somebody had to say, like, she really, no, dude, she's really into you. Mm-hmm. And she told her mother right after she met him, this is the man I'm going to marry. You know, the night before the wedding, Laci called her mother crying, and her mother wasn't sure why. She thought maybe it's jitters. Because Laci, all she said was, I'm going to lose my last name. I'm going to lose her maiden name is Rocha. Mm-hmm. And she kept crying, saying, I'm going to lose that name. And her mother knew that's not really what she's so upset about. It was just odd. She was really, really panicking the night before the wedding, but she went through with it. And of course, this now haunts her mother in hindsight. Mm-hmm. And not long after they married, Scott began having affairs, at least two of them. They had a business together. They sold it because they wanted to start a family, and that's when they moved to Modesto. Laci became a substitute teacher, and Scott became a fertilizer salesman, fertilizer being a euphemism for something else, and I find it very appropriate given this man's ability to sell us all a load of BS.
Yeah, he definitely found the proper job for him. When I see home videos of Laci that the parents released. And I remember doing stuff like that too, getting my father's camcorder and taping like fake commercials and fake television shows. And everybody said the same thing about Laci. She was beautiful. She was intelligent. She was smart. She was funny. She was caring. She was headstrong. And I feel like this would have been a person like I would have been friends with. You know, when she wanted to do something, she was going to go out and do it. Nobody was going to get in her way. And I respect people like that so much. I'm sure you would have liked her a lot too.
One of the most heartbreaking things to me is that Laci really, really wanted to be a mother. She and Scott struggled to conceive. She was very disappointed that she couldn't get pregnant at the same time as her close friend. She had called her mother very upset that her friend was pregnant. It's not that she didn't want her friend to have a baby, but she wasn't getting pregnant, and they always planned to have a baby together. And it took many years for Laci to finally get pregnant. And when she did, she was elated. She called everyone, telling them. It was right after she had taken all the pregnancy tests. She had to tell the whole world. Later in the pregnancy, Laci expressed that Scott didn't seem interested in being a father. He didn't want to touch her belly to feel the baby kick and move, which I find very, very weird.
Very.
Very unusual. And Laci dismissed it as a midlife crisis because she said, well, Scott's pushing 30. He's avoiding fatherhood, but that's not a midlife crisis. I think she was grasping for any explanation because she knew in her gut that this wasn't normal. He seemed repulsed by the idea of the baby. And when Laci was about 7 months pregnant, Scott began his affair with Amber Frey. He told Amber he wasn't married, and he told her that he had lost his wife. This
Big
is
old quotations on that one.
before Laci had gone missing. He presented himself as a widower. But more on that later.
Yeah, there's such red flags. I mean, obviously, this is what Laci wanted. She wanted to be a mother so badly. She wanted to have that family with Scott because she did love him very much. But when I hear that story that, you know, her mother was at her house one night and sat down next to her and asked if she could feel the baby move, and Laci started to cry because she said that Scott never asked to do that. And it was always very strange to her. Now, I know that a lot of men take a little bit longer to mature than women and might not be as ready to be fathers at younger ages. I mean, he was before, you know, younger than 30. That's pretty young. And men could have babies, you know, forever. But eventually a lot of guys do come around. It happened to my sister. Her husband did not want to have kids. But when he started seeing that all of his friends were having children, and he realized, oh, this is like the next step in life. And they had children. And he is, I never would have believed it if I didn't see it now. He is the best father I have ever seen. He's so devoted. Everything in his life is to his kids. And that's the normal progression of guys. If somebody decides they don't want to have children, that's fine. Nobody's, you know, forcing people to have kids. But he put himself in the situation. He was having this baby was coming, so it's either get on board or leave. She would have been more than happy to take care of that baby on her own. She would have been sad, of course, but didn't have to go to the extremes that it went to. The only thing he was really interested in when it came down to the decorating of the room, and they gave him a little like sailor theme in the room, that was like the only time she said he ever seemed to be really into it, when they were coming up with like little sailor themed things for the rooms because he liked to fish. But it's like, that's the only thing you're looking forward to? It's your son. It's heartbreaking.
Isn't that interesting? Because he liked to fish. Now it is Christmas Eve 2002. Laci is 8.5 months pregnant, so she's ready to pop. Scott says he last saw her around 9:30 a.m. She was watching Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart was talking about lemon meringue cookies, and Laci was mopping. He left to go fishing. Now, this is weird in and of itself. Laci had complained to her family that money was tight, and Scott bought the boat kind of impulsively. And then he explained it away, saying, oh, it was going to be a surprise.
First off, when you're going to make a large purchase like that, it wasn't a big boat, it was a smaller boat, but at the same time, when you're in a couple and you have a baby on the way, any sort of purchase like that is something that you're most likely going to discuss. Also, on top of that, the day before, Laci and Scott went to Laci's sister's salon because she would cut his hair, I think every month or so. And he had made this big production of telling everybody that he was going golfing. He mentioned it, and I think Laci's sister actually said, it was weird that he kept talking about how he was going golfing the next day, especially since the family was supposed to be getting together later on that night. But yeah, so he's talking about all this golfing. Not till the day of, on Christmas Eve, did he suddenly decide instead of golfing, he's going to go fishing. Apparently the weather was not very good for golfing. I would assume that that would mean it wasn't very good for fishing too, but whatever, that's what he said. I don't even know. So some people say that Laci didn't know about the boat at all, and some people say they did. The manager at the warehouse said that they had seen Laci there before, but everybody else swears up and down nobody knew about this boat. Nobody knew about the warehouse that he kept the boat in.
That's what I found as well, that all the evidence suggests Laci and her family had no idea about this boat, and it was very odd that he had purchased it.
Yeah, it was a very recent purchase too.
Very.
He said that he hadn't gotten it into the water yet, and that's why he wanted to take it, because he wanted to test it out in the water. And also, it's a freshwater boat. It's not really meant to be taken into the bay. I guess you can, because it's not like you're going out into the ocean very far, but I'm not a big boat expert, so I can't really say if saltwater does any damage to a boat like that or over freshwater. It all was just very strange. It's Christmas Eve. It's cold. Everybody said it was a very cold time. And you're going out fishing in the morning when you should be probably staying at home, helping your wife, getting ready so that you guys can go to see her family later that night. Just a thought.
He stuck to that golfing story later as well. We'll come back to that, but the golfing thing is important. I don't know why he was so adamant about saying that he golfed. He did dream of being a pro golfer, and he gave that up for Laci. Well, I have no idea whether he was actually a very talented golfer, but that was his dream. I wonder if, as part of his lies and all that, he clung to this fantasy of, I was just golfing.
I think that he had intended to have that be his story and to hold on to it, but as we'll go into later on, once things start to come out, he probably started realizing, oh, they're going to check this story.
Yeah, people saw him at the marina.
Exactly.
Oops.
People saw him. There's going to be cameras at the place he's going to go golfing, and they're going to see that he's not there. So, yeah, he probably had intended for that golfing story to be his alibi, and then realized that it just wasn't going to work. Too bad he wasn't smart enough to think of that quicker, but, you know.
There were various eyewitnesses who said they saw Laci. Some claim to have seen her dog wandering around with his leash on. The leash was muddy. 2 different people said they returned him to the yard. There were other people who just spotted her. But the thing is, none of this could be corroborated. All of these people, this was something that Scott's family, Scott defenders will run with and say, no, the police just had it in for Scott. They didn't look into this neighbor and that neighbor. Actually, they looked into all of them. There was one woman who said, I know what time it was because the football game was on. And they said there was no football that day. I never thought that the eyewitness accounts, also we know that eyewitness testimony is pretty unreliable. This case was everywhere fast. The minute she was missing, it was all over the place. And I think people mean well and want to help and want to feel part of something, want to feel like they're making a difference. And maybe it skews what they're thinking or what they think they saw, but none of this was really backed up. And the cops did investigate it. Now, another issue with the timing, there were a couple of searches on the computer, and this is something that could skew the timeline a little bit, that seemed to have been made by Laci, but easily could have been Scott throwing people off. She loved sunflowers, and somebody searched sunflower umbrellas and then a scarf on the Gap website. I'm not convinced that Laci made those searches. I think it's very possible that Scott did that on his own. And then things really get weird because now he's on his way home from fishing around 2:15 p.m. And this is the bone-chilling, hey, beautiful call. It's so phony.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like one of those things, you see it happen a lot in cases like this where people are trying to cover up their tracks. And they leave these voicemails for people they know are no longer alive. And they're always this, hey, honey, bear, sweetie, I miss you so much. I was just thinking about how much I love you. And, you know, Jodi Arias did it. A lot of people, you can tell, look, when you're with somebody for a long time, you're not on the phone with them going, hi, Snooky Bear, my little boo-boo face. It's hey, what's up? All right, so I'm leaving right now. I'll be home in like 5 minutes or so. I'll hop to the shower. We'll get ready to go.
And the fact that he's calling to say, I can't reach you. I've been trying to call you. Okay, people have been together a long time. You know what that kind of call is like. Why aren't you picking up your phone? And you'd be irritated. I'm getting worried. Can you answer me?
That's exactly it.
What are you doing? Not, hey, beautiful.
Why is it on the day when I need you to pick up your phone? I'll pick up your phone. If he had sounded pissed off in that call, I would have believed it way more. I'm trying to get in touch with you. Why are you not answering your phone? I'm all the way home. I'm trying to pick up that present for your mom, and I haven't been able to, so I guess she's just not getting it. That's what it would have been like.
Not this.
Hey, beautiful. Man, we'll be able to get to the Villa Farms to get that basket for Papa. I was hoping you would get this message and go on out there. I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
Later in the day, much later, Scott tells Laci's mom that she's missing. And that word gives her mother a very bad feeling. Why is he using the word missing? Missing? He could say, I haven't seen Laci. Is she with you? I'm getting worried. But right away he says Laci's missing. And it's not Scott who called the police. It was Laci's stepfather that man, the way he broke down when he was pleading for her return.
Yeah.
That broke my heart so badly. He loved her so much, and he was the one who made the call to the police. Detectives come and they talk to Scott. He tells them he was golfing all day, sticking with his story, but then he changes it and he does tell them he was fishing, and they ask him what for, and he can't answer. Then he says, yeah, sturgeon. They said, what kind of bait did you use? He doesn't know what bait he used. He doesn't even know what he was looking for. They followed up on that and they said the stuff that he had on the boat never would have been appropriate for sturgeon anyway. And he came home with no fish, as Nancy Grace said, no fish. Where's the fish?
Oh, Nancy, she was a real fan of Scott's.
Yeah. And not suspicious at all. Scott immediately washed his clothes when he got home. He said that it was because he had gotten wet while fishing. But there was no fish. Anyway, yeah, that's very odd to me. He threw his clothes in the wash right when he got home. And the detectives found the yellow pages. Remember the yellow pages? Open to a full-page ad for a defense attorney. I guess Scott was thinking ahead. Also, I'm not able to corroborate this, but there were reports at the time that Scott, in this time period when Laci's first missing, had gone and ordered porn channels.
Yeah, well, I guess he's figuring my wife is missing. I might have a couple of lonely nights and Amber's too far away.
Yeah, I don't know where this came from, because the media at that time, they wouldn't retract things even if they were wrong. They would just put everything out there. This was also, it's important to note, the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle. This was a new thing. So every little detail, whether it was accurate or not, was reported. So I don't know 100% that Scott ordered porn channels. It's possible.
It was such a mass hysteria with the media that, I mean, literally, this was a regular suburban town that the media just balled upon. They were everywhere. And everybody wanted to be the one to get the scoop. So you would get facts, you would get stories from people, and they would rush to air it. So they weren't taking the time to find out whether or not it was true or false. I did hear about the porn channels, but again, it's speculative. I don't know how you can really prove that unless, you're diving into their records. But to me, the weird thing is you come home and your 8.5-month pregnant wife isn't there when she's supposed to be. Her car's there. Her purse is there. Her keys are there. Everything that she would need if she was going out is still there. Your dog is in the backyard wearing its leash still, and your wife's not there. So you immediately throw your clothes into the washing machine and take a shower? That doesn't seem normal. I mean, maybe it's just me. I would be more concerned.
A massive search for Laci ensued. At one point, there were up to 900 people looking for her. There was a reward posted. It went from $20,000 to $25,000 to then $50,000. Her family was so desperate for her return, and the community was so motivated to help. And a vigil was held in Laci's honor. And this is where the awful photos of Scott looking anything but distressed were taken.
Big smiles.
Big smiles. And I know they've explained that, well, he was talking to his niece and they were taken out of context, but fine. You want to dismiss the pictures, that's one thing. But at the vigil, he disappeared to make a phone call. Who was he calling? His girlfriend, Amber Frey, and pretending he was in Paris with friends celebrating New Year's. He had even given her a fake number to make it seem like he was abroad. And I know we aren't supposed to judge people and how they behave during a crisis, because, there's so many different reactions. Some people fall apart. Some people need to be hospitalized. Some people need sedatives. Some people become very detached as a way to cope. But in my opinion, and I have been through plenty of tragedies, unfortunately, and I know you have too, this is beyond the scope of normal behavior. He's giddy, and he has no problem calling his girlfriend and bragging about Paris while he's at the vigil for his missing pregnant wife. I can see why Nancy Grace went nuts, because that is not, oh, he's aloof, that's just how he's getting through this, or he's distracting. No. He is so calculating on this phone call. That is not a man who is grieving. No.
Yeah, it actually reminds me a lot of another story we did, Casey Anthony, where he had this whole story planned out. He had all these friends that he inserted into the story, these made-up people, and they, he's sitting at the Eiffel Tower right now watching the light show, and it's so beautiful, and there's so many people around. And it's like, yeah, you're surrounded by people, and there's a light show because you're at a vigil, a candlelight vigil for your missing wife, your pregnant wife, so also your son. And it's chilling to listen to that story. He doesn't even sound remotely upset. He sounds joyous. He's just beaming, getting to talk to his girlfriend and tell her about all this wonderful things he's seeing in Paris and how much fun he's having. And it's just absolutely chilling. And you're right, we shouldn't judge people who are going through mourning or any sort of loss or fear, because we don't know how people will react. But I guarantee you, they're not going to react by calling up their lover and laying all this BS on them.
There were times during the aftermath of certain tragedies where I'd crack a joke. I've been known to cope through humor, and I suppose if you took my picture in that moment, I'd look like I was laughing. But all the people involved, all of us, we always had this sullen look, like life has just punched us so hard in the gut.
Yeah.
We have dry humor. We try to get through it, but you could just see there's just the life is missing from your eyes when you go through something so horrible. He doesn't have that. He doesn't, in his voice, his affect is just, like you said, joyous, elated. And you're right. It is just like Casey Anthony grinning ear to ear in her hot body contest while her baby is supposedly missing. It's very similar behavior.
And you're talking days. It's not even like, oh, what do you expect the guy to do? Mourn forever? It's like, this is days that she's got missing. They still haven't found them yet. You're thinking all sorts of things. I am fortunate enough that I haven't gone through a missing person issue, but I would imagine that even if you're finding little moments of laughter here and there, for the most part, you're just lost. And there's not much you can do, and you just feel helpless. But if you look, every single picture that I found of him at that vigil, he's socializing and smiling, and I don't see a single tear. Again, not everybody cries. I get that. It's just, he doesn't have that lost look in his face of this helplessness of, I can't do anything because the people I love are missing and there's literally nothing I can do about it.
I would be sick if anyone I loved, let alone someone pregnant, about to give birth, I would be beside myself all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I understand some people don't necessarily cry, but there is a sickness, an uneasiness. You're not able to rest when someone you love is in danger. But Laci's mother has spoken about this, that when she knew about another missing girl, all she could think about was her compassion for the parents, because she said that feeling is like no other.
Yeah.
It is the worst thing. It was worse than getting the news that she's actually gone. It was just that idea of, where is she?
Yeah, because you're just thinking about what they're going through. And I'm not a parent, but the idea that you have no idea where your child is and she could be being tortured or worse would probably keep you up every single night. I think that's the real fear. Are they scared? Are they in pain? Are they calling out for me? Like, that's what I could only imagine they're thinking.
Throughout this period of searching for Laci and police closing in on Scott, Amber Frey becomes a key player. She is everything. She contacts the police when she sees Scott in the news. Initially, I think she can't believe it. I've heard her talk about it, the level of denial, but it's the same face and it's the same name. How many Scott Petersons sell fertilizer? Wait a second. So she calls to verify that it's the same Scott. Wow. I mean, can you imagine you've been dating this guy? You're really in love with him. She thought he was the love of her life.
Mm-hmm.
It was a real hot and heavy romance that they had. And now she's finding out, oh, wait, he's the guy with the missing pregnant wife and everyone thinks he did it. Oh, my gosh. As we were just saying, fudge.
Fudge.
She calls the police and she gets the dispatcher, and the dispatcher is very dismissive of her. And she calls again, and the detective, the lead detective, happens to be standing right there and sees what's being typed out. He goes, that's the girl. Put her on the phone. And he is, oh, this is his Christmas gift.
Yeah.
Because this story, this changes everything. Everything. She's very disturbed. Once she sees on the news this guy's face, remembers that he said, I lost my wife. This is my first Christmas without her. And now she went missing on Christmas Eve. Amber agrees to record all her conversations with Scott and give them to the police. And she recorded MVP nearly 30 hours of phone calls. And Scott would test her knowledge of the news here and there. Oh, did you see this story? You know, trying to figure out if she was on to him. And she would play the dumb blonde. No, I haven't. No, Scott. So Scott, being the genius that he is, doesn't seem aware that Amber's recording him. And he actually buys that she has no idea. This was everywhere. I cannot overstate how much of like a rock you'd have to be living under to not know about Scott Peterson, Laci Peterson. It was everywhere. I was a little kid opening my Christmas presents and I knew who Laci Peterson was.
Absolutely.
That he would believe, like the level of arrogance that he would believe Amber had no clue. No.
Yeah, it was literally everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing it on the newspapers, in the news, in the radio. Literally everywhere you went, this was the main story. Because if you weren't talking about this, you were talking about the conflict in Iraq that a lot of people did not want to talk about. So,
yes.
And this was Christmas Eve. A missing pregnant woman who's literally about to give birth. She is 8.5 months pregnant. Her face was everywhere.
And she was beautiful. She just had this image that she was very girl next door. So everyone could relate to her. This beautiful
big, bright,
young woman.
Smile.
Now, Scott eventually, I actually enjoy hearing this when he confesses to Amber that he's actually been married and he was dishonest and she has to act like she has no idea. He thinks he's making this big revelation. He has no idea that he's been had. And poor Amber, the Inquirer got word about the affair and the police, they didn't want the family to find out from the tabloids and Amber's going to have to come out. And she has to do this press conference. And she is shaking like a leaf. She is so scared. She's a very religious woman. She's a single mother. She's a very nice lady. She had no idea Scott was married, let alone all this craziness. She never asked for this. And that she was brave enough to help them. She could have said, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't know Scott. No. She really stepped up and did the right thing. I think she's a hero. I truly do. She's amazing. So this press conference, you would think that after the press conference, Scott would stop being so forthcoming with her. He just kept calling her. So, he understood why she had to come forward. Okay, she had no choice. And then he just kept confiding in her, and she recorded all of it. This was the turning point for the nation. Everybody was like, oh, I remember it. I remember being a little girl, and I remember Amber Frey's face and everybody being like, holy shit. This is big. This is huge. Changer. Big time. Now, it's a misunderstanding that Laci's family, they were protective of Scott, but it's not true that they only started to suspect him after Amber came forward. They were already starting to turn on him. They knew something was very wrong with his behavior, with the way he was acting. The fact that he sold Laci's car, something was very off. And this just solidified their loathing and their suspicions. Like, okay, you know what? You're a real son of a bitch.
Yeah, they were out there really campaigning for him and telling everybody they had a great marriage. He loved her very much. But not only was it just like his behavior to them, it was what he wasn't saying. So he wasn't going out there with them and going on TV and pleading for her to come home. And you look at these videos where you see Laci's mother and her stepfather and her father and everybody sitting there just begging for her to come home, and you don't see Scott doing it. And Scott would act very strange to the people who would be volunteering to help do the searches, and he never wanted his picture shown.
We know why. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
He said, oh, I just want everyone to look for Laci, not me. No, it's because you didn't want your girlfriend to see you.
Exactly. So he would make all these weird demands. And at that point, when these people are helping you look for your lost wife and child, you shut up and you let them do what they need to do. Who cares what picture they use? Just go find my wife. And, like you said, he sold the car. He was looking into selling the house. And this is January. We're not talking she's been missing for a year and he's getting rid of all this stuff. He had every inclining that she was not coming home, and that was starting to get on them. And when the cops finally revealed the identity of Amber to her parents, it just really, that was the final nail in the coffin. And I just remember hearing a story about how Laci's mother just broke down and said, why did he have to kill her?
And Scott's interview with Diane Sawyer, this was supposed to be his damage control, where he admits to a romantic relationship, but he doesn't call it an affair. He says that was wrong, but it is a train wreck. He lies to the point that Diane Sawyer looks like she wants to just strangle him. Like, you have got to be kidding me. He claims that Laci knew about Amber and was okay with it. Are you kidding me? Really? Your 8.5-month pregnant wife knew about your affair with another woman and was okay with it? Are you really? You're going to have the audacity.
Diane Sawyer said it. Amber even said that to him. Everybody, whenever somebody you'd be like, yeah, she was fine with it. Everyone would be like, your 8.5-month pregnant wife was totally cool about you having an affair? Sure. And the best is he's sitting there and he's lying so bad throughout this interview. And now that I can look back on it and watch his first interview with the police, I see just how deep these lies go. He told Diane Sawyer that the cops knew about the affair. He never mentioned the affair in his interview. He said he told them from day one. He said that, all these things that he told the cops about that he never ever said, and that they cleared him on it when they never cleared him on anything. And of course, all the stuff about Amber.
Have you seen the interview with him? It's before Diane Sawyer, where he's crying and he says he just wants Laci to come home. It is the worst fake crying I've ever seen.
Is it the one where it's just like that one single tear he managed to just barely squeeze out? You just see it kind of slowly going down his face. The only tear I saw him shed the entire time this was happening.
Yes.
That one lone little tear that it probably took so much effort to just squeeze out of his little lying face.
It's mostly that he just messes his face up because, just come home. It's so fake. It's just, and I know some people say, oh, well, men handle things differently. Not the men I know. No way. No way. No way. This is not normal.
Yeah, and he it's not that he's not crying. See, he's trying to cry. He's making it look like he's crying. There are men out there who don't cry, who something horrible can happen and they just don't cry. I get that. But he wanted everyone to think he was crying. So why would you want people to think you're crying if you're not, and you're this big, tough, manly man? Do you have any idea how much effort it must have taken to get that one little teardrop squeezed out of that giant melon of his?
He's a sociopath. Laci went missing on Christmas Eve in April of 2003 on the shore of the San Francisco Bay, which is behind me because I am a smartass. Connor's body was found. The next day, about a mile away, the really badly decomposed body of Laci washes up on the shore as well. Now, this is my warning. This part's a little bit graphic, so if you have a weak stomach, just skip ahead a bit. Laci was missing her head and her limbs. They realized it was she because of her tan pants and maternity bra, but she was decomposed to the point of almost not resembling a human body. Because of this, it was impossible to figure out the cause of death, but it was pretty much agreed upon that Connor died in the womb as a result of Laci being killed. And Connor was much more well preserved than Laci. It's thought that he was inside her for a lot of the time that they were in the water and that her body protected him, so that's why he wasn't so decomposed. And given the currents in the water, experts determined that the body was left right where Scott had been fishing.
It's just pretty amazing that the body happens to show up in the exact bay that he said he was in that day.
Right, and that the water, the way that it had moved, if you went backwards, was right where he had been. And he had, by the way, looked up the currents in the bay not too long before Laci disappeared. That's something that convinced her mother that he was guilty.
Yeah, he when he went to his warehouse to get his boat, he had done some time on this computer while he was there, some emails, and he looked up the currents of the water that day. Just so that everyone's clear, when they talk about Laci's body being as disfigured as it was, it's not believed at all that she was dismembered and then dropped into the water. What is believed to be the case is that she was weighed down from her limbs and her neck. And there is evidence in the warehouse that Scott had made a bunch of anchors. He had a bucket, and he filled it with cement, and he made these homemade anchors, which is not a really uncommon thing for fishermen to do. Instead of going out and buying one, you could make one. But you don't need 5 of them. There's residue showing that you could see where 5 different anchors were made. So he had tied these to her legs, her hands, her arms, her neck, and then dumped her into the water. And through the time of decomposition, marine life, and the currents, it's believed that parts started to decay off. And once she was no longer tied to these anchors, that's when the body rose. And Connor, being in much better condition than she was, it is believed that he was still inside her for most of this time, and that he probably didn't even come out until the day that he washed ashore.
It's very hard to think about this.
Yeah. It's very disturbing. It's horrible when you think about that beautiful smiling face of this woman that was all over the place and what she was left as. There were no organs inside of her body. They said the only organ they found inside of her body was her uterus.
They think that she was probably smothered, suffocated somehow. That's why there was nothing at the house. It's very simple. She had been smothered, suffocated in some form, and then dragged out through the side of the house.
Yeah, and they believe apparently on the day that he was interviewed, the police did notice a scratch on Scott's hand. So what they believe is they went through all of her jewelry and they found the only things that were missing were a pair of screw-on diamond stud earrings. So what's believed is he either had strangled her or smothered her, and in the process, scraped his hand with these earrings. Now, of course, we can't prove that she was wearing those because, unfortunately, her head was never recovered.
Scott was arrested not long after the bodies were found. That was it. He was found near a golf course in La Jolla, and it is thought that he was heading for the border. He was going to run to Mexico. He had dyed his hair blonde. His family says that the police knew about the dye job, that this wasn't just when he was on the run, that they had already spoken to him. They knew about his hair color change, but I don't think that helps their case. I just think that he was probably going to try and get away sooner than they arrested him. His car was full of camping equipment and survival tools and Viagra, because you never know. And 4 cell phones. 4 cell phones, among other stuff, including his ID and his brother's ID. Definitely not someone looking to flee. No, sir. This can all be explained. The car was stuffed with crap, like so much stuff. And he had an excuse for everything. Oh no, I was using my brother's ID to get into the golf course. I love how it all came down to golfing again. Like, where was he? He said he was golfing and he was taken in golfing.
Yeah.
With that stupid dye job. So again, to clarify, his family says, he wasn't dyeing his hair to hide from the police or to be on the run. The cops had already spoken to him with his dyed hair. I think that was just poor timing on his part. His intention. He didn't decide, I want to go blonde. Why do you think this guy decides to change his hair color so radically?
And it's that like really bad brassy dye job too. Like, we ever have a friend who has really dark hair and decides to go blonde, but they do it themselves, and they end up with that just orange, brassy, yellow color to their hair. Like, this was clearly something. If he wanted to, he had enough money, he could have gone to a salon and had it done professionally, but no.
It was a rush.
He wanted to not be recognized. Yeah. He wanted it to be done quickly, and he wanted no one to know about it. And they found all this stuff in his car.
And money, the cash. So that was another hilarious explanation. He had a ton of cash, thousands and thousands of dollars. And his family said, oh no, we took that out by accident and we gave it to him. What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because instead of wiring money, I obviously just give you $14,000 in cash.
$14,000. Imagine the teller's face.
Seriously.
It was an accident. I don't know any ATMs that give you $14,000.
Nope.
Back then,
you're gonna drive around a lot.
Remember, this is 2003. This is long before Venmo and all that stuff.
Yeah.
This is, you got to go to the teller to take out that much money. And it's a big deal. It's suspicious. Oh, it was an accident. And I just gave it to Scott for safekeeping.
Yeah, and he's all the way down in San Diego. He said he went down there to kind of flee from all the press and everybody on his neck all the time, and that's why he changed his hair color, because he didn't want to be recognized. But no, he's right by Mexico. This guy was going to make a run for it.
And
anybody could have seen it.
He was originally from San Diego too. He knew the area, and chances are he had. Most people who grew up in San Diego have taken trips to Tijuana. They call it TJ. It was very likely that's where he was going. Scott's trial was controversial mainly because there was almost no forensic evidence, and a lot of people took issue with the fact that he was convicted of murder and sentenced to the death penalty for both the deaths of Laci and Connor. He was convicted, all on circumstantial evidence, and what a lot of people felt was, well, a man didn't act right, which is true. I do think that the media overdid it. It was nonstop coverage, Nancy Grace being the ringleader. A lot of analysis was put into what's he behaving like, and that's not very scientific. We all know in our guts, common sense, that this guy is acting strange, but it's not something that should be a factor in a trial. It's interesting though, because this jury, even though there was a lot less evidence than there was in the Casey Anthony trial, she got off for everything. And there was more forensic evidence in that case. And she also behaved very strangely while her child was supposedly missing, but they let her get away with it. Scott, though, I think everyone was just so convinced that he was horrible. And I think what really did him in, Casey's lawyers were able to make her look slightly sympathetic. Scott, the turning point for him, the jury was not going to go for it. They've said there was not enough. There just was nothing there. Everything was circumstantial. Amber Frey walks into that courtroom, and that is that. They said it was the way he told her things about his wife. When she brought up, why did you tell me you had lost your wife? That was it. That's what swayed the jury. I agree. For me, that he said, I lost my wife and it was long before she went missing, and this is my first Christmas without her. That and the location of the bodies being where he had been fishing that day, along with the anchors and her limbs missing. And why would her limbs and her head be missing? It all points to him. And I don't feel that any of the alternative theories really make sense or add up. There had been a burglary across the street right around the time that Laci went missing. And Scott's family will say that wasn't looked into. It was a satanic ritual killing. There's so many other things it could have been. Actually, all of those things were investigated. The guys that committed the burglary on the same street, they had been checked out. They had nothing to do with it. And the other thing is this. Let's say someone else did do it. Not only would someone have had to have done this, they also would have had to be looking to frame Scott. That's where it doesn't make any sense. Could you make the case that maybe someone attacked Laci, someone kidnapped her to, I don't know, sell black market baby? Maybe. But this person also knew to dump the body right where Scott had been fishing?
Yeah, it's all a little too... You'd have to really think outside of the box to kind of think into these different ideas of what had actually happened. I mean, the satanic ritual thing, I feel like anytime a woman goes missing or her body turns up and it's like, you know, horribly mutilated and everything like that, I think that's like a go-to. People always go to satanic rituals. If there were that many Satan worshipping people in this country, then I don't think Christianity would be as popular as it is. But
right. Yeah. And there were some people said, oh, but you know, there was another pregnant woman and she had guys following her, and she says she would have been killed that day if someone hadn't helped her. But the numbers are no different than any other year that pregnant women get killed in. I mean, it happens. I'm not saying it happens constantly, but it happened as frequently when Laci was killed as it did any other year. It's not like, oh, there was this group running around killing a ton of pregnant women. No, actually.
Yeah, it's just we live in a really, really, really crappy world where horrible things like that happen all the time. As far as the men that committed the burglary is a little muddy there, because some people say that it was on the 24th. A neighbor said they drove by and they saw these men that looked suspicious in the driveway of the neighbor's house, and that happened on the 24th. According to the police, it actually had occurred on the 26th, and that the two men who were eventually arrested for the burglary also claimed that it was on the 26th and had alibis for the 24th. They also, when they were brought in for questioning, they went out and said right away, yeah, we did this burglary, but we had nothing to do with that pregnant girl. So some people are like, well, how did they know about a pregnant girl missing? Because everybody knew about her.
Right.
She was everywhere. That's not a way to defend it. Everyone knew about this, and they're in the same town, in the same city. Of course they heard about what was happening, and they don't want to be branded as murderers and a baby killer too, because she's so far along in her pregnancy. There was all this evidence that they said apparently that while they were in the prison, the guys that had committed this robbery were on the phone talking about, oh, what are we going to do about the whole Laci thing? And the other guy was like, shut up, they're recording this. And this is supposedly a guard came with this information saying that they had the recording, but mysteriously the recording went missing. And the guard then suddenly didn't want to talk to the police about it. So it just seems like it was a lie. And then I think it got kind of out of hand, and he realized that, oh no, I'm going to get in trouble for lying to the police, so I'm just not going to talk about it.
What about the person who said they saw Laci yell at the robbers?
Yeah, that people say that she had gone up to the people that were in the process of robbing her neighbor's house. Now, I don't think I'm a little weakling, and I do have a tendency of maybe sticking my nose where it doesn't belong and maybe getting myself into a little trouble with my big ass mouth. But I'm not going to approach 3 shady looking people who appear to be doing a crime and start questioning them about it or confronting them. Especially not if I am an 8.5-month pregnant woman. No pregnant woman would, because their main concern is their baby. And they're not going to put themselves in danger and risk anything happening to their baby.
Okay, so these robbers then decided, oh crap, let's just dump her and let's find out where her husband was that day, and let's put her body there.
Yeah. That you would have to logically have this be the way it really happened. You would have to assume that these 3 low-time burglars, we're not talking about big high-end criminals here. They were knocking over a house of people who were on a vacation. So you have to take these non-violent criminals that then decided they're going to kidnap a pregnant woman and then hold on to her for a few days until they hear all these stories about her and find out where her husband was fishing that day. Then they're going to kill her. Then they're going to dump her there. And I'm sure that the marina was probably filled with cops too, because they knew that that's where Scott was. So, and they were doing searches in that water. So it wasn't one. They kept going back and back and back doing searches in the water. So it just would have to all line up perfectly for this to make sense. And it just doesn't. And people don't just go from being a burglar to being a murderer out of nowhere. And this would have had to take a lot of thought. They would have had to have her for a bit, then go through the process of killing her and dumping her. It just doesn't make logical sense.
Did you come across this in your research? Because I did. That dogs were brought in to look for Laci, and I know they were discredited at trial.
Yes.
That they had not been trained properly. They did pick up her scent. That was not viewed as credible just because the dogs were not trained properly. However, when Scott was told that dogs were coming, he took the boat cover and he soaked it in gasoline. And there are pictures. The police had to hang the thing out to dry.
Oh, see, I didn't know about that.
I came across
about
that.
The dogs. Yeah, see, what I heard was that the dogs followed her scent going all the way to the dock. But everyone was like, but that doesn't make sense. If she was in the car and being, transported from one place to another, why are the dogs smelling her going all the way to the dock? And then they were saying that they were using something that would have both Laci and Scott's scent on it. And then the whole thing about the dog wasn't properly certified to be a cadaver smelling dog. So they basically, it's just kind of another piece of evidence that you just can't really use.
There's also Scott's family. And by the way, I really have no respect for Scott's family. I'm sorry. I know that they love him, but I think that they're bending over backwards to cover for him. It's one thing if you really don't believe your loved one did this, but it seems like they know and they just keep trying to get him out. And they've been pulling to get him a new trial. They say there's a local reporter who thinks he's innocent and he has all story. That guy is a kook. I listened to him. What a stretch. Everything is an explanation. Oh, the reason he was worried about the police, when they were searching for Laci, he said, don't mess up my cars because he thought his wife was coming home. It's like, what?
Or
no.
he made all these different anchors just because, that's what fishermen do.
Yep.
Again, I don't know how many fishermen need 5 anchors. And you can see it. There's a piece of evidence of this piece of plywood that was on the ground in the warehouse, and you see these circles where the cement was. And then they say, oh, what happened to all the extra cement? Oh, well, he took the extra cement and he took it home to fill up a little, side by his driveway because it was all potted out and, it was getting filled up with water every time it rained. You're not going to use that much cement for that. It just doesn't make sense.
He acted very shady about the warehouse, too. He lied to the police when they wanted to put the lights on to search properly. He said, oh, the power's out because it's part of a strip mall. And the police tried to corroborate that. They said, what time do you cut the power here? They said, we never cut the power. It's a strip mall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was looking to hide that, right? So the tarp or the boat cover, whatever you call it, was cleaned with gasoline. He doesn't want them looking at the warehouse. He'd made these anchors. And also people say, well, nobody saw anything. Yeah, well, it was Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Who's out on the boat? Right.
Exactly.
People are cooking like crazy and getting ready and buying last minute gifts. And the other thing too at trial, the big junk science was they tried to show that if he were to dump the body off the boat, he would have tipped the boat over. They tried to recreate it.
Yeah.
They tried to recreate this and they couldn't, and they had to put a stop to it because they kept capsizing the boat. But it's very simple. He didn't have to drag her body over the edge of the boat. You pick her up, lift her, and throw her over. You're not actually pulling her, dragging her off the side. He's an experienced fisherman. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't have to drag her off the side of the boat. He knows he's going to flip the boat. You pick her up and throw her.
It just seems that when they were doing that experiment, maybe it's just me, but it seems like that guy was almost trying to get the boat to capsize. He's huddled in the corner.
Yeah.
He's got this weight, they made like kind of a makeshift body to, symbolize the exact weight that she would have been with these anchors attached to her. And he's in the corner with it. He pulls the weights over to the side of the boat too and kind of keeps them there and is kind of rocking a lot while he's trying to pick up. He's acting like he's picking up 3,000 tons. Like, it's not that much. He's a big guy. He could probably lift whatever was in there, not that hard. And it just seems like they were going out of their way to make it look impossible. None of the defense explanations hold water. And it's not like all of them have these convoluted stories surrounding them. So it's not like, oh, he did this because he did that, and then it led to this. It was, well, he made these anchors because he wanted to take the boat out another day, and he didn't have them from the day before. And then the hair was in the pliers because she's been in that warehouse before, and it just got there somehow. That's another thing. They found a pair of pliers, and in the pliers was a piece of Laci's hair. One strand, sure, but it was there. Why was it there?
Right. And I know hair gets everywhere. So it's not a lot. And I know that the jury, they all said it was Amber Frey's testimony that did it.
I agree. I think that she was the real sinker on him because she was able to establish a motive.
It's funny. There's a lot of men who say that the mistress saved the marriage, because they gave the man an escape from whatever he didn't like in the marriage, and then he could find it more tolerable and didn't get a divorce because he had someone to escape with. And in a way, this mistress saved Laci.
Yeah.
Without Amber Frey, they had nothing.
Yeah, I don't think he would have gotten a conviction without her.
No way. And look, his family's still pushing. He sits on death row right now. Under the current governor of California, there's a hold on executing anyone. Doesn't mean they won't, but under the current governor, he will not be executed.
No, yeah.
His family's claiming he's innocent and pushing for a new trial. I actually do think you could make the case for another trial. I don't think he got a fair trial. I don't
either. No. I 100%. I do think he's guilty. This has nothing to do with that. He did not get a fair trial. There are many reasons, just looking at this from a completely objective point of view, he is absolutely entitled to a retrial.
Yes.
Between the media frenzy that was going on, if you watch videos of that courthouse, you would have thought that you were at Woodstock. Every day, it was packed with people. They had to auction off seats because they thought that by not televising this, he would be more protected and they would be able to have a more fair trial. But
people, they had a lottery to get into the trial, and people would be screaming. And also they moved the trial not far enough away, but they moved it, out of Modesto, and people just followed them. And a radio station took out a huge billboard slamming Scott right next to the courthouse.
Yeah. So literally it was so tainted by media portrayal. And on top of that, there was some iffiness going on with the jurors.
Yes.
And I'm speaking about one juror in particular. She was actually a replacement juror because they had to let one go. I'm not going to say her real name. I will just say that she went by the nickname of Strawberry Shortcake. And I guarantee if you saw a picture of the jurors, you would know exactly which one I'm talking about because you're going to see her and you would go, yes, that's somebody who probably would go by the name Strawberry Shortcake. But she had lied when she was being questioned about being in the jury. She lied. She had a restraining order against her boyfriend who attacked her while she was pregnant with her child. This is clearly something that the defense should have known about. It definitely will taint how she feels towards the defendant. And immediately after convicting him of this murder, she went out there and started doing interviews, calling him all sorts of names. So clearly she had feelings towards him. And on top of that, with the whole frenzy going on, that this man was really, he started off this trial with everybody thinking he was guilty. And in this country, that's not how we do it. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So yeah, I absolutely believe that he has every right as an American to have a retrial. I still think he's guilty, and I still think it will result in him being guilty.
Yes, it would. I just think it's a big waste of money. That's probably why it hasn't been done, because he'll be found guilty all over again. Everyone said they didn't think he'd be acquitted. At most, it would be a hung jury, especially once Amber came in. Before that, was not looking good. It was not looking good for the prosecution. Then Amber, Frey. And people feel, well, is it right to give a man the death penalty because he didn't act the way you think he's supposed to act while he was grieving, and because he had an affair? Men have affairs all the time. That's what his family said. Well, men have affairs. And I think it was his father said 95% of them, you know? And
oh my God.
Yeah, 95% of them. I think it was Barbara Walters who said, while their wife is 8.5 months pregnant. No. So look, yes, the jury was completely saturated with news. There was no way to find a jury that was oblivious to this. It was everywhere. It was the burgeoning 24-hour news cycle. We're going to war with Iraq and people are looking for an escape.
Yeah.
Everyone had seen Laci's face. Everyone had seen Amber Frey. Everybody knew. Everybody was just waiting to see this guy go down. And you know what? Because he's got a face. He's a smug son of a bitch. You want to see him get it. I understand that. But I think it does warrant, if we're going to go by the letter, yeah, I think he deserves a new trial. I hope they don't, just because I think it's a waste of money, because I think it's very obvious he did it. But if we had to say, okay, what's the right thing to do? Yes, retrial.
It's just to be fair. Like, that's what you're entitled to in this country. You're entitled to a fair and impartial jury. So if you're getting a trial that's this tainted, and it's tainted. There's no other way to put it. Even though we both agree that this man is guilty, it would be wrong of us to deny him his rights when that's the way it's supposed to be. If it were up to me, you should give him to, Laci's family and let them do what they want with him. But that's not how we do things in this country, and we have to follow the law. And yeah, he really is entitled to it. I just found it very funny, though. This is not to find any part of this humorous, but there was one witness that they called. The defense called him. He was a doctor, and he was trying to defend the fact that there's no way that the body that they found of Connor's had been in the water for as long as it had, that the baby was actually born. It wasn't that she was put into the water in Laci's stomach, that whoever had Laci had waited until Connor was born and then dumped him in the water. And he had all this science that he was going by and basing it on. And then the prosecution got up and questioned him for like maybe 2 minutes. And everything he said completely fell apart. He was solely basing the fact on when the baby would have been born based on conception, which has nothing to do with what happened in this case. And actually freaked out on the stand and was like, "What do you want from me? I'm doing my best." I just find that to be it's so symbolic of the whole defense's strategy in this, is that it was just all pulling at threads and seeing what will make everything unravel. And no matter what they did, it just made no sense.
There was no Jose Baez to create a real reasonable doubt. Everything was a reach. It didn't pass Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. No, not these burglars didn't randomly turn homicidal and kidnap a very pregnant woman and cut out her fetus. And I mean, no, and dump her where the husband would have dumped her. It's insane. We know he did it. I mean, that's that.
There's no satanic cults.
No, and they determined based on the baby's bone growth that he died when Laci died.
When they actually did the proper science for it, then they've realized, oh, okay, this is how it really happened. And, like we mentioned it before, when you have experts that are going to testify, they're going to testify for the people who are paying them. That's just the way it is. It sucks. You wish everybody would just be honest and truthful, but it doesn't happen all the time. And yeah, I'm glad that they were able to really squash that one, because if they were going to sit there and put any doubt in the juror's mind about Connor's death, whether he had died with Laci or if he was actually carried to term, born, and then died. And then there was all this other stuff because they found this like material that was wrapped around Connor and a piece of tape that was stuck to his ear. So, they kind of put this whole into that satanic cult thing, and this is part of their ritual of killing the baby. The baby was floating in a bay. I think we can all agree that the ocean is pretty polluted.
Right.
It got wrapped up in some stuff, and unfortunately, the baby was caught up in all this debris. There's no signs of strangulation on the child. There's no signs of any sort of forced trauma to the child. He was just a baby who never got to be born, and he died inside of his mom's belly the day she died.
I feel so bad for Laci's mother. She wrote a book about Laci. She's such a classy lady. She really carries herself with such grace. And I felt so bad for her when she finally got to go to the house and collect Laci's things. It was all over the news that she and Scott Peterson's mother had gotten into it.
Yeah.
Because it was really the first time they had an opportunity to look at each other face to face. And they were in-laws, and I heard Laci's mother say, "Oh, we did. I did have words for her because I didn't like some of the things she said throughout this whole thing." Comments she made. Yes, I addressed it. I cannot imagine being Laci's mom and having to look at Scott's mom and know that Scott's mom is out there defending him and lying for him. Oof.
Yeah. That's got to take a lot, because it's not, you want to understand how they feel because they're trying to save their son. But at the same time, your son is the reason why you don't have your grandbaby, and you'll never see your daughter-in-law again. And, if you're going to say, well, Laci wasn't their child, so they didn't have as much attachment to it, okay. Connor was their grandbaby. Grandparents, the way I get to watch my parents be with my nieces is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Because you get to be a parent again, but you don't have to do all the bad stuff like discipline them or, make them hate you because you won't let them dye their hair pink or something like that. But it's so much love and it's so much joy, and their own son robbed them of that. It's terrible. And the things that this whole family went to, because his parents aren't guilty of anything except for defending the indefendable. But, it's heartbreaking. A whole family was destroyed. It wasn't just Laci and Connor that died that day. It was that entire family. All because some douchebag just couldn't keep it in his pants. And he wanted to start his brand new life with his new girlfriend. And that's it. And this just goes to show you, I had made this point to you previously, Laci was beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Amber Frey's okay. I'm not going to sit here and attack her appearance or anything like that. She's a pretty girl, but Laci was gorgeous. So it just goes to show you, when men do something like this, it doesn't matter if you're a supermodel, if you're the most gorgeous, intelligent, funny person, an amazing wife who does everything that she's supposed to do. Men like that do this because there's something wrong inside of them. And he just took it to an even more extreme than most of them do.
Yes, there's no reason he couldn't have gotten a divorce except that he's a narcissist and he would prefer to live as the widower in the story he was peddling from before Laci ever went missing. And at the very least, Laci's death resulted in a new law. It was signed into effect by President George W. Bush under federal law. It's known as Laci and Connor's Law. Anyone who harms or kills a fetus during the commission of a crime against a pregnant woman will be charged with a separate offense. As always, it's very important to Marisa and to me that we let the victims of the crime be remembered instead of the perpetrator who steals all the headlines. I do think, though, that Laci's face is what endures. She was robbed of her life. She was robbed of the gift of motherhood at just 27 years old. Connor was never given the chance to bring joy to his mother and his grandparents. May they rest in peace.
I'm glad that we have this chance to humanize Laci and Connor. And even though he never got a chance to have any sort of a life, he should be remembered. And I hope that everybody, if they take anything away from that, will just take away the fact that this beautiful, beautiful young woman and her baby were stripped away of the life that they rightfully deserved. All because of, really, someone's narcissism.
I'd like to add one thing, and this is something I heard Amber Frey say. She was asked, is there anything you'd like to say at the end of an interview? And she said she wanted women to remember to always listen to that gut feeling, because she had it and she ignored it and it went so wrong. And as you said, Laci was beautiful. It's not your fault when people behave this way. And as Amber said, trust yourself. Thanks so much for watching. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. Leave us a comment with your thoughts and follow UnKind TV on Instagram and Twitter. Martha and Marisa signing off. Bye.